Okay.
Okay.
Alrighty. Also, so what I have here is like a mix. I am not the designated trainer. We are training Jean as part of this, so she could be trained better than I can going forward. But what I wanted to do was divide this into kind of two sections. Starting out, one is sort of the kind of overall MandE, what I use to like I've been using to demonstrate it to the divisions and to people who are interested in, please give me a 20 minute overview of MandE. And that'll sort of give you the biggest picture of what it means for apt and what the point of it is. And then I want to dig into a little bit more about what the features I train the administrators on to how to kind of configure and set it up. And that will probably, so we're going to kind of go through the overview and kind of go back again through stuff from more of an administrator perspective of how it fits together. So that's what I figured we do so that everybody can then be on the same page. Any questions, or should I just cease with the ado? Without further ado, MandE is short for the monitoring and evaluation. We just kind of put the words together and made it into a song. Highlighted all your project results at your fingertips. The idea is that we have tons of different international development projects as well as technical assistance projects, all of which have to do are doing certain things out in the world that they're trying to accomplish and have to monitor their results. Traditionally, what we've done at apt is every project comes up with kind of reinventing the same kind of procedures, and oftentimes they do it on an ad hoc basis using Excel and various combinations of Access, Excel, emailing in what your results are, and things like that. And the idea is to create an enterprise level system that we can reuse on various projects that will do a bunch of different things. One is be able to enter the results framework of a project. Those are basically the project's goals, what it is they're trying to accomplish, on the one hand. On the other hand, enter elements of the work plan. So these are kind of the hierarchy of things that you're doing on the project. Different projects name them different things. So let's say in the original version there's the overall project, and then there's separate activities within each, and each activity might have multiple tasks, and each task might have multiple deliverables, etc. So we want to track all of those and then track them against the result frameworks on the one hand, to be able to say this particular activity is geared towards furthering this part of the results framework. So if we're trying to improve health governance, creating ultimately doing some kind of trainings with ministries of health on how to do electronic health records, geared towards that one particular part of the results framework. The other piece of it is be able to track our actual results. So one thing we try and, so let's say, and there's different kind of levels of results. We call them indicators, but one is, so there might be kind of high-level results, like this project is trying to reduce infant mortality, and you want to be able to put in, just from some kind of outside source, that yes, the target was to reduce it below 10% in a particular region. It has this is 8% on this region, 11% in that region, and 12% over time. And the other piece is you might want to be calculating some indicators based on the types of things that you do. So like, let's say you're doing, I'm going to use trainings as an example because I think it's the easiest one for people to get their head around. But let's say you're doing trainings, you want to increase the knowledge around a certain topic. So maybe your indicators are the number of people trained and their level of increase of knowledge based on a pre-test and a post-test, those kinds of things. So basically, it's kind of putting together the whole idea of MandE, monitoring evaluation, is to relate your outputs, which are your work plan, to your results, which are your indicators, and then relate both of those to what your goals are, what you say you did in a project. That's sort of the fundamental point of this thing. In addition to it, we have other features, because once you have the work plan, we have other kinds of features that we include in the system that might be For example, tracking the geographies of different places that we work, tracking organizations that we work with or for that we're targeting for our work, tracking people both as users or as just partners or other people involved somehow in various ways in the project. There's a calendar, there's file sharing, all of these kinds of things that go along with it. One thing it's not, although it has a lot of features of, is a full-fledged project management system, and that comes up a lot. It has a lot of the work plan elements of project management and some places to put budgets and things like that, but it's not, and you can put in dates of particular activities and things like that, but it's not meant necessarily at this point to track, your key project management things of have you delivered on your deliverables against your budget targets, things like that. Projects have other systems generally that do that, but are not tracked. We want to know what the results of all these project management efforts are, and that's where MandE stands out. Like you could be delivering your projects and your goal, you can do everything in your contract without actually having any results, right? So that's what the difference is between a monitoring and evaluation system and a project management system. You can be checking all your boxes on your project, but then what do we have to show for it? So the key, so having a central system, what this kind of initial slide is showing, has value to apt, that we can continuously improve it. If everybody's using the same system, we can keep adding new features to it and getting more and more things that we can sell and that we can use, reducing the learning curve of our team, right? And we can share successes, and we can, and then we can add it to proposals that will lower our bids, and because we already have this system and we don't have to buy it or license it from somebody else. We can add proposal materials, and then the value to the projects is there's a lot of out-of-the-box features. We can build and track these indicators and all the things that I just talked about. One of the keys to it that was sort of the hardest nut to crack is the relationship between what comes out of the box and what's configurable. And this is sort of probably the essential problem of any POTS product, right? Because there's things, if it's, every product has its own unique needs, and that's sort of like, well, we can't use the standard system because our project is so unique. But of course, if you make it completely flexible, then you're not really selling it. Don't really have anything that's like, Salesforce, and you have to spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars configuring each thing. But if you make it completely rigid, then it's not going to meet anybody's needs. So we've handled that in two different ways. There's sort of the out-of-the-box customization, there's out-of-the-box stuff that we have. And then there's lots of different site settings. As new projects come on and want new different things, we can show and hide particular features. But the key things that we have done is we've linked part of MandE to fluid surveys. So with fluid surveys, in a particular part of MandE, either we, as supporting the projects, or actually the project team themselves can configure their own data collection forms in fluid surveys and link them to MandE. And that's where we make, so we have out of the box basic things that you might need for each element of the work plan. You have your name and your description and your dates and your status, all the things that are sort of, narrative, to link it to organizations and staff, all those kinds of things that are sort of everybody needs. And then there's data collection forms where where you're putting in, the team will put in their own very particular needs of, this is the number of seeds that we distributed at this particular site, or whatever it is that's really related to, this is the number of nutrients, supplements that we've distributed, or whatever it is that they're actually doing on the project that makes the content. And it's that link between fluid surveys, custom data collection, and the core tool, which makes this, I think, the most powerful product. And then on the indicator side, we've actually built our own kind of custom indicators to kind of like a query builder for them to do the indicators. So let me just run through some of these slides, and then we'll, all right, well, does that broad overview make sense? Yeah. Okay. I'm getting good faces of acknowledgement in the room. Yes. I forgot to share my web. Oh, his webcam isn't available. All right. So I'm not going to worry about the webcam right now, because that takes, oh, it is available. Okay. So let me just, I'm going to go through this as slides for this part, and then kind of go into the demo when we go into the more administrative features. So just sort of as we go through. So the first page of MandE is a dashboard where we've developed 4 main panels for now. On the left is My Activities and Programs. This is for kind of the end user feature to say if they've been assigned to a particular element of the project, then kind of the things that they care about are going to be listed there, so they can just kind of jump in and get their work done. They don't have to see through and have to navigate through the whole rest of the project. Then there's a kind of panel that shows various kinds of things, and there's more tabs that we've added since this screenshot was taken. But you can, and different projects seem to care about different things. You know, kind of a deliverable tracker. This is more kind of a project management feature. Recent photos, deliverable status, project statistics, and I will kind of just show you here. Well, this is one that we're just starting off. This is a Zambia one. So, and some of the names have changed. One of the features we just added is to be able to change the name. So in the screenshot you see, it says My Activities and Programs, but we just made it so that you can also show, in this case, it's called My Tasks, Subtasks, and Activities, because different projects in their work plans have different hierarchies. So that's something, but you can see here recent photos, recent benchmarks, which is another word for deliverables in this project, various project statistics. And there are other tabs that you can set up that you may or may not care about. A project may or may not care about in the site settings, or that's something that we might get added. Can you add a particular new report or chart to the dashboard? Below that, we have indicators. So I mentioned that's sort of the main thing that they're tracking, and there's a way when you set up an indicator to say, to like mark it as show on dashboard. So like the most important indicators will show up there. I mean, they could show all of them if they wanted, but the idea is like they would pick the priority ones that everybody can see. And then there's a project calendar. So this is the results framework that I mentioned. There's 3 tiers to the results framework, which is pretty standard in international development projects. As the overall project goal, there's what's called interim results, which are sort of key things that you're kind of overall things that you're trying to accomplish. We never actually accomplish results. We only accomplish interim results. And then there's sub-interim results. You know, because a real result would be like, you know, ending malaria, right? And interim results are like reduction of malaria to a particular, you know. So nobody's going out to say like this project will end malaria, because that's just not true. Or, well, you know, this complete transparent governance in throughout Africa. You know, it's just not going to happen. So the idea is that you have interim results and sub-interim results. So the interim results is one big thing you want to accomplish, and then it's like these are like the sub-things that you can do. And all this is data-driven. It comes into this pretty picture, but projects, when you configure, can set up your results and interim results, and then associate particular activities in the project with these, so you can report on like what activities are we doing to drive these particular results. So that's one main feature of it, is being able to kind of to enter your results framework and associate activities as well as indicators with it. Then we have the custom work plan data. This is what I was mentioning before. So there's various levels of the work plan. This is a screenshot from our JTA project in Papua New Guinea. And here I'm just showing how you can seamlessly link the out-of-the-box data collection with the custom data collection and fluid surveys. So the tab that's showing here is being pulled in from fluid surveys through a synchronization feature using the fluid surveys API, and where they're tracking the number of males and females where there's suspected measles on the one side, and then on the left are sort of the standard features, was just the name, the task, and the status, and things like that. So the hope is that the administrators have to know that this is going on, but the end users won't even know the difference between whether they're collecting it in MandE or in fluid surveys. And you can see here for each thing, for each part of the work plan, there's various tabs of data that you can collect. And so one of the things I want to go over is how this is all set up. Along with that, you can track again, the progress of your deliverables or activities, or it's hard now because they used to all have standard names and they have different names. I'm calling them level 4s at this point. Yeah. Using different tabs in green and red so that you can actually monitor both the activities themselves as well as the monitoring evaluation function. A lot of times what happens is that the monitoring evaluation, there's like one person who's the monitoring evaluation staff, different from the project management staff. And the project manager wants to make sure that the deliverable happens. Like, did they do the training? But then the monitoring evaluation lead needs to make sure, like, well, did you enter your data on that it happened? Did you, fill out all the forms about who, what you learned and who attended, and if they were a pre-test and a post-test and a feedback form, they have to make sure, track that all those data were actually filled out. So there's sort of a review and an audit function that can be shown as well. Here's what the indicators generally look like. Projects, again, can generate indicators to monitor progress against their targets. You can put in the targets that you want, and then it collects data over time as you're entering, as each staff member enters information, it kind of builds up over time, and then you can do disaggregations as part of your query builder as well when you can drill down into the details. So you can view the high-level indicators, disaggregate the indicators, drill down to the item-level details. And as I mentioned, MandE allows for really two types of indicators. One is, and these are really kind of separate things at this point. One is the calculated indicators based on the outputs. And those are things that are maybe a little bit, further away from the results. They're more about, a lot of times, at least further away from about our outputs. Like, there's only so much we can track based on our own entry. You can track how many people you've trained, you can track sort of what they learned, but it's harder to track the actual end results of these things. Whereas the direct data entry indicators are things that, let's say you just want to, just at the end of each quarter, tell me what your results are, right? So it's just like a one place to enter it. And so one example of that is if the data is coming from another data source, and you're just sort of entering it to have it in the same as your own activities. So this is the main indicator overview. You see we have the different types of things, with the quarterly data, the total year-to-date data, the target, and you can see your progress against the target. There's only a few, basically at this point, you can do sums, you can do counts, and as of yesterday, or last week, the thing that Brendan Small just added was you'd be able to calculate percentages. Up until now, you'd be able to just sort of enter 60%, but now the newest feature that we added was if you put in a numerator and denominator, it can actually calculate percentages as well, and then put them in the right quarters and disaggregate them as well. So this is how, when you drill down into the details of disaggregation works. You can define the data of interest for detailed views. So here they wanted probably one of these, the health promotions, no, not here. And then they also wanted it disaggregated by, this is a health, by topic in this case. And then you can see various topics in various colors by quarter. And all you have to do when we get to the indicators I'll show you is just say, once it's saying, count the number of health promotions, and then disaggregate by, and you pick another column by field, and will come up. The system also has sort of overall project tracking. So there's like a project overview field. This is telling you the number of activities by status. There's other tabs that show the number by activities based on the total on your results framework. in various views. So you can kind of just a number by technical area down here. All these things are captured and just kind of give the project overview. Any questions so far? Obviously, I'm going over this fast, and I'm going to drill down slower.
What about when you've got really complicated indicators? Like, one of the things that occurs to me is in the AIRS project, they have the number of structures sprayed per spray operator. And it's not a number that's entered on its own. It's you take all of the work done for that spray operator in the day and calculate that indicator.
So obviously it depends on how the data are entered. So if you're entering it, and there is a way it might, I'm trying to think exactly how you would do that. If you're entering it sort of on a daily basis and enter the number of spray, the number of structures sprayed and the number of, and the person, we could then, if we have it at that level, I think we can build it up. Yeah. So we have to, a lot of the key to this is making sure you're setting up your data appropriately as the data are, in order to collect.
Well, one of the things that makes that particularly complicated is that most of the indicators are at a structure level, and this is at a day level.
Right.
So, normally what you're trying to figure out is how many people were in that structure and things of that sort. Now you're talking about pulling out a bit and saying, okay, now take this information that wasn't entered by the structure and give us an indicator for that.
I do think if we can get it so that it's entered by, structure name, spray name, sprayer name, and then it's just cutting the data in a different way.
Instead of a report that we could generate.
Right. I should say, I do want to, so that's in terms of data collection. Technically speaking, as we build the indicators, the indicator builder really has kind of two levels. A bunch of levels to it. There is an indicator builder kind of GUI, which is okay, and probably can use a little TLC, but the way it does it is you have the GUI, and then it creates SQL, and it stores the SQL somewhere. And Brendan can correct me if I'm wrong, or somebody else. But my understanding of the way we built it is that so you can use the GUI to create the SQL, or you could just have a developer write their own SQL, and then store that SQL, so you can kind of just override the custom indicator builder. So we made it so that it's a cut so that the non-developers can use the GUI to a certain extent, but that doesn't preclude us. The GUI doesn't preclude us from doing more complex.
Right. We have to dive in and do more.
Right, and the data, the way we store indicator data is we store the whole SQL statement so that it can then be either just handwritten or whatever, using some, or through the GUI.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. So another key feature and selling point of MandE is the monthly or quarterly report feature. This is the thing that two of our current main instances, the HFG and our HUD, which is actually domestic technical assistance housing project, use this sort of the most intently. The idea is that you enter all your data and all of your work plan elements. They don't even use, the HUD one doesn't even use the indicators yet, but what they like is the monthly or quarterly, they have a monthly report. So when they have 11 different projects, separate app projects using the same system, all within the same kind of space, and each of them has monthly reports and they kind of overlap each other. So they can go in, enter all the data into MandE, and then just pull it out using kind of a one-click function. But I think what they like even better is sort of as an afterthought, we added, well, let's say you're going through it and you want to view it on, then you want to edit it. They can kind of edit it right there on the screen when they're looking at the report. You can see that here on the right. Like they can edit the quarterly progress notes if they don't see anything in there. Like you can get it through the main navigation if you go under that program and that activity and find it and enter a progress note, or you can see it here and just kind of create a new note or edit it while looking at the report. So that was meant originally as like somebody who was reviewing it didn't want to have to go back to enter it, you know, go all the way through the hierarchy to fix something that they saw or that was missing. But it turns out a lot of people use this as the main interface because what they do is at the, you know, the end of the quarter, at the end, you know, a lot of the users just enter their data at the end of the quarter, at the end of the month, and they just go into the report and use method of doing data entry, which is fine. That's sort of like, you know, design with the user. You look at the user, you know, how the users use it, and you don't tell them they're doing it wrong. But it's
have you ever done an evaluation, like a real quick evaluation of how, like feedback on MandE users?
Yes, sort of. We did do, I put out a survey a couple of months ago of about just 10, 15 users at one project, you know, at Kenya and HFG.
Oh, just, but not across all MandE users?
No.
I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah.
To see what people are using and feedback they have.
Yeah. And I say sort of because I collected the data and then didn't get around to analyzing it.
Some of that was also for the pitch reason. Like,
right. We kind of, but.
Yeah, I don't want to sidetrack, but I do think that.
But I think that is a good, and yeah, I talked to Dan about that as well. It would be kind of, as we were thinking about doing some modernization stuff, to do some real kind of user testing and get past kind of the people that we deal with at the kind of manager level, but to do a couple of quick interviews with the day-to-day. Yeah. Because we built, I mean, when did you first build this, Brian? Like, this is...
I'll get there. 2013, 14, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Like I said, I don't want to derail your presentation, but I do think that all these features would be really interesting to know what's being used.
And definitely what's interesting is that one particular project really only focuses on getting this monthly report out. Another one doesn't use the monthly report at all and uses just the indicator. You know, like our PNG one, JTA, only uses indicators and has not yet done anything with the quarterly report feature. HFG uses both because HFG is a $200 something million health finance and governance project in IHD, and they were the flagship project. So we got all of our initial specs for them, so they kind of use everything that we originally built. But everybody else is like, oh, I like this one. This one piece doesn't fit, and so on. But when we were building this quarterly report, like our original point of contact said, like this reduced at least his work as the M&E lead by like on, you know, getting the quarterly report together by like 75% time. Because before that, they were like everybody in your Word document, you know, your updates, and then back and forth in email and corrections, and all this way it's all. And then they had to compile it all into one big report. So this is like a huge boon to that. MandE also has collaboration, or at least file sharing features. And for that, so we have the API for OneHub for data collection, custom data collection. I mean, for Fluid Survey for custom data collection. There's another API to OneHub where we store files, and files themselves can be associated with different areas of the work plan, as well as once you're creating custom data collection tabs, you can also say that this custom data collection also needs to be accompanied by particular files. So for example, there might be a requirement, like if you have a meeting, you have to upload your meeting agenda and your meeting registry to prove that there's a lot, sometimes some projects have a lot of kind of need to be audited, you know, they get audited on like, did you, I guess there have been problems in the past where like people said they had a meeting and it never actually happened, so they have to actually upload pictures. Well, you know, who knows what's going on out there in the other side of the world. They come back to headquarters and, you know, so they actually have a requirement to upload a picture of the meeting in the registry, and it's not just, you know, all those kinds of things. GPS, like,
for that,
right.
Actually there at the meeting, right?
Right. It's no joke. So, and so there's a file collaboration piece also. Roles and permissions. I will get into that more, but there's 4 levels of permissions and some audit logging of the activities. So that's sort of the overview of all the different features that we have. Just in terms of the current status, we have 3 active projects, that are sort of kind of going on and using it in their day-to-day life. When I say 3, that doesn't include the fact that HUD TA is actually one implementation using 11 different projects in one system. JTA actually has 2 different separate, project contracts that they have in one system. And HFG is one, but it's one $200 million project in 27 countries, so it's not like it's not no small affair, right? So if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, except for sometimes people don't understand how it can be short to make it fit their project. Our 2 newest ones are PS3 Tanzania. I can't remember what the 3 S's are, or even the P, but PS3 Tanzania and can I nix that from the recording? And Zambia PS8. So PS3 started we kind of got up and running the end of 2015, and Zambia we just told her it's live as of on Friday, which doesn't mean there isn't still coding,
Minor
tweaks that need to happen, but she does have the system, and public sector, health something. And we're also sort of coordinating with another IR&D project, an IUG, for kind of integrating with CCAN, and again, there's numerous bids pending all over the company to use MandE. We also now have, we should get a charge code this week, an IR&D project to add a couple of new features to MandE. IR&D is the internal research and development money run by the Reputational Capital Office Department. And so we have a $20K to add in a mapping feature, because that's something that everybody seems to want, even though they don't actually know what they want on map. They just know that they want their M&E system to have maps. So we have to, part of that is to figure out exactly what, we want to basically say, yes, our feature has maps, here's so that obviously needs to be some kind of configuration of what it is you want to map. Do you want to map the activities, or do you want to map the indicators based on geography?
What level of geography is
Yeah, as well as some offline data collection is the other piece of that IR&D piece, which we think we can handle either I don't know if it's natively or not, but through fluid surveys, because we're using fluid surveys as our, as doing a lot of this connection. And fluid surveys has an offline mode, and so we can kind of do offline data collection through fluid surveys, and once they get online and gets uploaded, to link it back into MandE. So I think that's one approach. Another approach would be to use other offline tools and have another interface for some other system, but probably through fluid surveys would be the, but we're hopefully also going to use some of that money to also clean up some other features. And there's a lot of, it's far from a bulletproof project, because we've only gotten limited amounts of time and money to do limited new features that projects want, and not a lot of money to kind of give care and feeding to the core.
Yeah, I think the initial phase, as I talked to, I think, both Brendan, Kidwell, and Small about it, is right. The initial ramp up to the IR&D spend is to do a little bit of code consolidation to help us for that build. So it's kind of part of the pre-work for that is to make sure the code's all lined up.
Yeah. So you might not be interested in this, but the idea is that MandE is more expensive than using Excel, but we try and keep it cheaper for app, than it would be to get like a third. Dev Results is probably the industry leader, I think, in M&E tools. Because it's an app product, we're not paying for licenses. We are paying for labor to configure it and hosting and things like that. But we want to keep it, depending on what parameters your project is and how many users and things like that, it's generally, we want it less expensive to use MandE. But projects have to pay for particular pieces of it. Generally, they pay for, we host it on AWS, initial consulting, this is your requirements and this is how they fit to MandE. Training, either kind of an admin training, the labor to deploy it, configure it, ongoing maintenance. but really the main kind of variable is customization. If they have new features, does MandE have a workflow that does this? So we need to import, we need to import from another data source, and we want to add
Indicators.
these new types of indicators or new way of calculating indicators, or we want to add discussion around files or indicators, whatever it is that each new project decides that they want to have. And that's where, CTC will make its money through the support of it. So the MandE trajectory is here. So we built the first prototype in FY13. We're kind of moving along. So right here now. We are now in FY17. Welcome to FY17, everybody. And so we've got the 3 new adoptions. Well, we've got 2 out of the 3 new adoptions that were projected here. We've been kind of preparing to scale by bringing the data, the source code, and over from our other developers. And we're sort of still in that mode by training getting developers up to speed on what the product is. In this meeting, for example, we had hoped to do a little bit more of additional IR&D work in the last quarter, but we're held off a little bit by other priorities internally and externally. So we kind of pushed some of that work into this quarter. But again, we have a bunch of projects that we've won that had MandE in the budget that they just haven't started thinking about MandE, including Shops Plus, which is a huge project that we think will get started on MandE soon, and a bunch of others where it's in the budget, and a bunch probably where it wasn't in the budget, but they might want it. So all sorts of things. So we do think that it's probably likely that we'll get 5 to 10 projects this year, and we'll need different people's resources at different times. Whew. I'm just going to take a breath, ask for any more questions. And yes, this is more than just a PowerPoint. There is an actual system. So, any questions?
I have some training specific questions, but I'll ask them later.
Okay. So I'm going to say a little bit about the technical 50,000-foot overview, and might defer a little bit to Dave to flesh some of this out. Just in terms of how, I know it's on ASP.NET and SQL Server, and maybe, or Brandon, and hosted on AWS. Maybe you can say a little bit more detail than that on, so what flavors of these things and how the actual.
So it's ASP.NET MVC, and it's Microsoft SQL. I guess it's always Microsoft SQL Server. But our current deployments, we are doing one M3 extra large on EC2, and we're putting both the code and the database on the same server. We were seeing some decrease in performance in using RDS unless we ramped up and spent a lot of money more on their RDS. It wasn't very fast. So we were going back to a one server model. We still do have 2 deployments that have the multi-server model. HFG and HUD are still spanned on RDS. So at some point we may want to bring them back in to increase their performance, but for now we'll probably keep it that way. And again, staging and production are on the same server. We just split it up by IP when we come in. And one thing that we do want to work into, hopefully during this initial IR&D sprint, is kind of our backup process. The databases are being backed up, and I'm pretty sure we're backing up locally on the server itself. So that's great for recreating, a data entry error, but that's not helping us from
disaster.
Yeah, catastrophic disaster. The server, we lose everything. So we got to do, hopefully, get a job.
I didn't know that. Okay, now I'm going to lose sleep.
So I want to make sure we get these data being pushed to an S3 bucket, which probably shouldn't be too bad. And as part of this migration from kind of our other rely on System 1 developer to the app team, we went from SVN to now using Bitbucket for version control. We're now tracking all of our tickets in the app control Jira system. So it's really, we're kind of now overseeing everything. It's all under our team's control. So if we ever need to go back out and get additional resources, we can. We prefer to keep it in-house, but that's the plan. We are, we have a pretty good deployment process written up. We've stood up Tanzania and Zambia over the past 53 or 4 months. We've done 2 deployments. We have that documented. We have the whole process. We just need to flesh it out a little bit more, but that's, it's a lot of steps of everything from spinning up the servers to what version, to setting up one hub and getting all the keys right, to getting your,
mail server?
That's not my
So this is developed mostly by a third party? Who would say?
Yeah, was System 1, were they the initial developer? Yeah.
Okay. Has it been developed by us, like, recently, by Brendan Small, did you say?
So, yeah, very recently, well, so Emily Savelli helped do Tanzania, ENR, and then Brendan Small is doing Zambia. So he's
so we are picking up from people here have worked on it recently.
Yes, and then Brendan Kidwell has migrated JTA over, and then Brendan Kidwell is going to do. We're doing a bunch of bug fix deployments, but then in about 2 weeks, hopefully Kidwell is going to spend like a 4-day chunk and really dive into the code and then do a big reconciliation as well. Because right now we have a bunch of branches off our core, and we need to bring them back in.
Okay. Is it going to be just us working on it now, or is the third-party people still going to be working on it?
90% just us for now. I think there's still a slight chance if System 1 ever comes back, they owe us some work, but probably they're not ever going to call us again. So.
Okay. Just wondering.
Right, so it should just be our team, but I think that's the first step after these kind of bug fixes is to do this big reconciliation and get everything back together.
What do you mean by reconciliation?
Well, because we had a core, and now we've branched off, and we've made changes to Zambia. And now we've branched off of Zambia to do Tanzania, and then
we're going to
get all that stuff back in. Those changes back in. And so that's kind of what Kidwell's going to do in this kind of 4-day nonstop span.
Right.
Is to kind of get.
Are you saying 4 days just because I said 4 days?
Yes.
50 days?
You realize I had no idea what I was talking about when I said it.
Okay. I mean, that's right. That's not in stone. I think we can.
Dave, you mentioned a pile of documentation besides what's the URL on slide, whatever number slide we're on right now, 17. And is that in Confluence somewhere, or where can I see all the documentation that exists?
I know Brendan Small has been taking notes on the deployment process. I have notes, so that is not out in the wild yet. I need to consolidate those notes for deployment. That's more the deployment steps. Not much on the code.
Don't forget, I need to get on board so that I understand what I'm doing and I don't break the JTA app while I'm working on it this week.
Yep. Yeah. No. But yep.
And I'm sort of winging it right now.
Okay.
So I guess.
Yeah, I can give you these documents. They're just for the deployment process. It may not inform you too much, but I can definitely send you over what I have.
Yeah, I'm just looking for everything that's written down, really.
Yeah. And yeah, so this isn't quite your level, but I also have this document that I sort of sent around of, this is more for the system administrators of how to do, and I want to quickly kind of run through these, mainly so you know the general topics of like how to set up the fluid surveys and sync them and things like that to get them into MandE, which, at least so you know exactly how it's supposed to work from an administrative point of view. And I sent that actually as part of this was part of the meeting invite that I updated last night. So one thing to note is that hopefully, and I'm not sure the extent to which this is fully gone, but the idea is that as we build new features, there's a lot of site settings that you can turn on and off. So if if somebody wants a new field, instead of just creating the new field and hard coding it or changing the label, you want to be able to, or something like that, to, we add to a site settings, show and hide this field. But that's already, which is sort of the right way at a certain level, but that's already kind of getting out of hand, and you have hundreds of different, site settings that turn on and out. Might need to figure out a way to organize those better.
Yeah.
you know, do you want to show this to staff? Do you want to show staff list on which levels of the hierarchy do you want to be able to assign staff? Those kinds of things. So, or a new feature for a report or whatever it is that, you know, the idea is that you don't want to break, you want to keep it so you're not breaking one system when you do another.
I think that's getting harder and harder.
It's harder.
Right. And also as we go from 5 to 10, you know, like so far, I mean, there's only 5 of them, but they're all pretty unique. You know, they have a core, but they all want to tweak it. Nobody's just said, sure, version 1 looks good to me.
Right.
Let's go with that.
Yeah. So, okay, let me just, and I'm just going to switch back and forth mainly just to, so I can look at the order of things I was going to tell you about. But I'm just going to use the Zambia one just because it's the most current one that we're working on. And again, so people and permissions.
Can I just say just one quick thing?
Sure.
So, as you know, Brian's on the staging server, so each deployment has the staging and production version. They both use different data. So staging isn't really it's where we put our pre-production code for review, but the data are different between staging and production. So it is a little confusing sometimes, and I think Emily has done a release where I think she pulled the data in production down to staging to make it a little closer. But so the good thing in staging, we can push up wherever we want and do whatever changes we want, but you're not going to see the type of data that you would in production as far as like indicators and all that kind of extra data. So one other note is that we also have a demo database, which I would love to demo in the demo database for the next time, but the demo database, what I think is the oldest of all, and everything breaks when I go in there, so it's not really great for demos. But I do think what we want to get to is sort of that will become what people code against for the original, you know, and that will be the central, and then we push those out, central core, and we push that out, you know, to each new deployment going forward rather than coding for the HFG or coding for HUD and then try to push it back and pull it back in and out in different hubs and spokes. All right, so this is sort of what I teach administrators, and I'm just going to kind of go through things a little bit quickly. So people and permissions, why don't I go on myself here? Do I know? There's a bunch of different, there's 4 key roles. So you create a user, and I'm going to also try and point out some weaknesses along the way so that you guys know I don't necessarily do this in other demos. You know, not really best practice. Like right now, somebody actually has to type in a password and just email out the password. It'd be better if it's, you know, has some other way of generating passwords. But you know, so that's one thing. There's 4 different roles right now: admin, data entry only, read only, and user. So the admin can basically see things that are in the admin tab, and then also some features along the way, and other things where they can see extra menu items. So for example, here in people and permissions, only admins can go in and modify users besides and things like that, or create their own indicators. The user role is should be the most common role. And it's not keyed to like what programs and activities you can assign users to particular activities and programs, etc. Or in this case, but that doesn't drive permissions, right? So users can basically see pretty much everything in the system. So one further feature that would probably be important to add somewhere along the line is to be able to say users can only see reports or data associated with their own, you know, with what they're working on. There is a role called data entry only, which is sort of like that, where you assign a user to a particular program or activity, etc. But they can only enter data. They can't see any reports or indicators built on that data. So we have part of that, and that's sort of like we have a third. You know, the use case there is like we have third-party partners that we want to get in. We want to get their data from them, but we don't want them to see anything else in the system. And then there's the read-only user who can see, you know,
read only. They can theoretically
they can see everything, right?
They can see everything, but they can't write things. Now, we do need a thorough review of this, and we've been, trying to get around to it, because I think some of these permissions are broken in some cases where you enter, that read-only can enter data in some places, especially. So that's something that we have to do also. I think it's in cases, for example, where they're hitting other tables and things like that, like the read-only might be read-only on the main deliverable field, but if there's a separate, like, add notes, maybe they can add a separate progress note. I don't think it's been as thoroughgoing. It hasn't been that thoroughgoing, and we just haven't had the budget or time to.
Are these things in Bitbucket?
Probably not yet, because we just got the new Bitbucket.
Okay, so we should add these things.
Yeah, as we see things, we'll have to figure out, and even if I demonstrate through, you'll probably see like runtime errors in various places, and so
the stuff we've taken over, like JTA has a bunch of tickets that Brendan Kidwell is working on. So the new stuff is in there, but not the historical, like 2-year-old
right
stuff. I have an extract of, like I saved it, but in some ways it's easier just to kind of go back through and see if the 2-year-old ticket is an issue.
So
with the verified it.
So we definitely need, a separate project. The problem is, like, right now we have money to like add cool new features, but we still don't have the budget for just going through and solidify it.
But you said you had some money left over. Why would you prioritize some of this outstanding?
Some money left over from where?
You said that we've got 2 big activities, mapping and
Extra offline.
offline.
I think we could
Yeah.
use some of that money, but we also have to deliver what we,
Yeah, I think it's kind of, we're going to do some ramp up, then do those 2 activities, and then kind of reassess, and then prioritize, with the whatever funds we have left.
Right. Okay.
So here, when you create a user, you can also assign users. So you can kind of assign them in different directions when you're when you're looking at work plan element. Some of the tabs have, you have places to assign staff to it, and as well as a role. Oops. Are they the lead on this particular piece, or are they? If I'm assigning myself to this task, am I the lead, or just an advisor, or just a regular staff, and I assign it, and I get added there, right? So you can kind of go to different directions for assigning staff, and then there's kind of an audit log. Hey, Brendan Small. This should probably be tasks up here in Zambia. Take note if you're listening. Okay. Okay. Activity, and then there's like activity log. This should stay activity log. It's not related to the work plan element of activity. And this is just to, like, audit stuff and to see who's logged in and those kinds of things. So that's people and permissions. There's, as I tell administrators, you have to make sure you click on enable login, because the list of people, not only just for, you can delete people also, but the same list of people is used both for users, but also just any kind of contact, kind of a light CRM kind of system, with organizations and people. Like, so if you're saying, I met with the Minister of Health, and who was that person, and those kinds of things. So you can have users in the people list. You can have, non-users in the people list, and associate them with organizations, which are up here. So you can add a new person here, just from that screen. So you do have organizations and people associated with them to track that. So later on, maybe if you're saying, if you have an event and you say who attended, you can just list the people who attended and then know their organization, get the organizations from the data. Next, site settings. Okay, so this is the piece that's sort of most important for us and the administrators, and the users will never see. But this is where we kind of set up initial things about the site, the project name, for example. Culture, I think this will, I'm not sure what this does, but I think it has to do with like the date time settings that look like American dates. Is that right? Anybody know? Or versus?
I never changed it.
That's probably what that is. Whenever it shows a date or a time or a decimal number on the screen, it'll use the right characters.
So we might have to change this, for example, in Zambia to using a day first instead of month, something like that. So it's good that there's a setting there for that. And these, I think, I'm not sure what exactly these are controlling. I think they control how the fluid surveys appear on the screen, but maybe it's the whole page, or I don't know. But you guys can figure that out.
The whole kind of like color scheme.
Could be. Oh yeah, because we can brand these, and I'll just show you.
HFGs.
Yeah.
Headache colors.
Actually, the culture question just reminded me. Are we generally deploying and using this all in English language, or do we write prompts and user interface elements or anything else in the local language that's not English in some cases?
Right now we only have English. There was a request recently. You can see. I'm just showing here the branding is HFG is different, right? There was a request recently to put the whole thing in. I forget which language. I think it was like I can't remember now. We might have just been in French, but yeah. Anyway,
if there's no translations of the UI right now, and we're going to do it, let's make sure that we do it right as a translation, and don't just like fork it and change all the labels directly in line.
Yeah, right.
Well, yeah, I mean that's going to be because also if we start doing one translation, it's not going to be a one-off. Yeah, I agree. It needs to be a more of a systematic
approach.
Yeah.
And then obviously, if it's never been translated before, and I'm not sure if the app is designed to be translated, that could be a lot of work of like going through and finding all the stuff that's hard-coded and then say, this right here has to be not hard-coded, it has to look up in the database.
Right. Yeah, and I know we've got a little bit of a flavor of that just from renaming the data elements. Just from renaming these 5 things, which is a separate thing than language, but it's related, right? Because we could call those, Brendan spent a lot of time just finding every instance, because some of them are in the database, some of it in the report templates, some of it are in the, on labels, some of it are referred, it's all over the place.
But it is a kind of good example on a small scale. Right now, there's an asset file that you reference.
Mm-hmm. So I think I told her that try first using just standard Google features for looking what the page translates, and I don't know if that'll work or not, but but yeah, that is an example of something, a custom thing. It's like what we want in French, and we have to figure out how much it's not that will cost. But then when we do it, we don't want to just translate everything into French, as Brendan said. We want to make it so that it's now configurable that you can do French or English. So here's the work plan, and here's, as I was saying, you can set all sorts of different pieces of what's showing and hiding on different levels of the work plan. And these names themselves, again, as I say, are configurable, but it's not as part of the UI right now. I'm not sure. Brendan can tell you how he actually implemented it. But show this tab, show that, don't show this tab. And basically what happened is the first HFG one didn't have any of these site settings. We just built what they wanted. And then as each new project came on board and said, we want this new feature, or we don't want to see this is too complicated, then we created it into a site setting. So the site settings are sort of accreting over time to say, we want a tab that says locations, and then we add it and make the default not, so that we don't add to any unless they want it, and then add it for the new implementations, whether or not, depending on what they want it. So there's this. I don't even know why that's there, but okay. I think some of what's here is controlled by whether or not you have it in the first place. So, and I know there's some issues here that I've had recently of sometimes you make changes and they're not actually saving to the database in the site settings, or they're saving but they're not reappearing when you go back into it. So other kind of bugs that have come up. But some of this we've handled just by fixing it in the database as a one-off, because it's used one time. Number of years. So if you want to see that, reporting, report settings, advanced settings. So here's where you set the fluid survey key, API key, the fluid survey password, very strong password we have here for PS3. And the fluid surveys API, and oh, here's the fluid survey CSS I was referring to before. And I think that's pretty powerful. I know, that's useful too. Like in the HUD tab, can you make our questions closer together so they all appear in one screen and things like that. The OneHub settings, so the API key for OneHub, Google Analytics settings. So all that is here under site settings and advanced. So that's kind of the first things we do when we configure, and it's also how when you develop new things, at least right now, we're implementing, showing them, or hiding them. Okay, moving right along. Manage lists. This is going to be really simple for you guys, even if it may or may not be simple for, but this is where you do your drop downs for various, various parts of the drop downs for the system, types of beneficiaries, the types of technical areas. Technical areas, programming areas are pretty important questions for these folks. A lot of the activities are based on what is the technical area. Like you're doing this kind of training and this HIV is a technical area or something like that. And then that's used a lot for the indicators. So this is straightforward stuff. Right now, they're all just in alphabetical order. Probably better to organize them in the interface, a little bit more, but at least something there. Some a little bit higher level is file types, not higher level, but so when you upload files, you can associate them with particular file types, and then files and you can add different types of tags or different types of data associated with those files. You can set here which file types carry which kinds of additional tags or data associated with them. All right, so we'll move on to results framework. As I mentioned before, this is where basically at the very beginning of the project, and most of the projects have this worked out already. It was in their proposal what the results framework were, or it's part of their initial stages, and then what the results framework are, and this is just kind of being carried over. This is the project goal, and then you put in the interim results with a number and a name, and then you go back and you put in your sub-interim results, and you associate your sub-interim results with a particular one of your interim results, right? So, and that's how you create the dynamic activity results framework, which can then show up as a pretty, let's hope pretty, we'll see, as this nice graph, right? And you can see here the IR overview, and this is like counting the number, as I mentioned before, the number of tasks by IR, by sub-IR, and that's driven, let's say right here. So in order to associate them, the interface is pretty nice. They just say this particular task or subtask in the results framework is associated with this one, primary, not associated with this one. And it can be like primary, associated, like it's primarily working on this, but also has secondary benefits of increasing the capacity of civil society to do health governance. So, and that's basically all they have to do to associate it with the results framework. All right, so that's pretty straightforward from both the user interface, I think, and perspective and a coding perspective. So in terms of the work plan itself, the element names, as I mentioned 100 times now, are configurable. So that's why in this documentation I just started calling them level 4, level 3, for each one. But it's, I think what we might want to do, just kind of for consistency of training and documentation going forward, maybe every time we can always have the L1, L2, L3, L4 as part of the MandE and with different names going forward or something like that.
We should not call them L1s in the training?
Call them L1, but in MandE also show L1.
Okay, so in the demo database.
Yeah, something like that. But site settings control what displayed. I just want to kind of drill through a little bit from the top level just to see. Well, first of all, here I say there's 4 levels, but actually there's kind of 5 levels because the highest level can also be associated with a few attributes. In HFG, it's called funding sources. Here, it's just called projects. But when you create a task, which is level 1, you can associate it with a particular, in this case, it's called project or funding source. There's not much else. There's no additional other data associated with it, but it does kind of create one additional level of the hierarchy. I don't think there's additional data here. So that's just, but that's like a major organizing principle. So for example, when it's in the HUD one that I mentioned had 11 different projects, at least you have one particular field that's just which project is all, disassociated with. Or JTA where it has 2. Or, so for example, if this project continues, there might just be one overall Zambia SBH here, but then maybe they'll get them up. They'll get, we're going to rebid. We don't want to create a whole new system. We want to keep all the old data, but you might want to create a new project, a new project under it and put everything else under there. So that's one kind of possible use for that, for funding sources. Or if you're doing a bunch of things in Zambia, one thing is funded by USAID, and one thing is funded by PEPFAR, et cetera, and so forth, but you want to use this to track our overall work and results in the system, rather than having 3 different MandEs, you can have one MandE and just separate them out by that. So that's kind of the highest level, and that's also the name is configurable, and then you kind of go into the task. And again, so just, I guess all I want to do is just kind of drill down through one just so you can see the levels of, just trying to find one that might have good junk data in here. Good junk data. No subtests yet. Okay. If I were a good trainer like Gene, I would have already decided which task to drill down through. But that's why. Which one did I try this one? That's probably the one I just tried a second ago, right? Why don't I go the other way? How about that? I'll drill up. That always works. Okay. Baki task, Baki subtask, that makes sense. Okay, so for example, and these are going to, again, these are changed depending on your site settings, but this is like this level, what we're calling level 1. So the first thing you have is a list of subtasks, in this case tasks and subtasks under it. And then here you can do yearly progress notes, and this is sort of a separate thing. You can enter all sorts of yearly progress notes here. Open, close them. And all this goes into the quarterly reports or, annual reports and things like that. Probably somewhere there's a save button. And then eventually it'll save and close or whatever. Okay. Oh, this year already has a progress note, marked as including report. So you can only include one yearly progress. You can only include one progress note in your key report, but maybe they have other notes that they want to do just for themselves. So you can, so it's kind of a feature, not a bug, that you can only include one for this particular period in the actual report. But if I do this and then save, then it should work. So now we have 2, right? Quarterly updates kind of work on the same principle. Here's where you assign staff. Here's, you can upload files associated with it, and you'll notice here, if I choose a file type, remember I was showing you before, you can assign different file types, have different types of tags associated with it. or different types of data. So that's where this ends up with. I'm going to risk it and actually try and do it. You never know, it might work. And somewhere eventually it'll show up here. Or not. So there's always things that are might take a second. I'm not sure exactly.
No, it showed up right away like that. That's weird. Right.
All right, it's weird. Get on it.
Check. Take a note.
And here's where you can run sort of a portion of the quarterly report that's just for this particular task. So if you want to just say if you're just involved in this particular one, you can do that. So then if you drill down, I'm just going to drill down here into the activity or into the subtask.
Actually, no, that may not work because it was a pre-existing task, so I don't think it has the right.
Okay. There's some excuse. You can see here there's just narrative, some result narrative, learning questions. These are just things that different people have requested. This is what, again, I showed you before, associating with result frameworks. You can associate it here, adding staff. You can add organizations. So, and what, is it the lead organization? Is it funder? Is it a target of our work? Is it beneficiary? So you can do that. Locations. So you can say where you're operating. Here, one bug, not bug, but slight. I'll get into geographies. You can select all for whole provinces. Basic, that kind of stuff. Right now, we actually have 3 levels of geography. This is only supporting the top and the 3rd level. So just because that was what was requested, or all that was needed by the one that, by Tanzania who wanted it, and they only needed the 1 and 3rd level, and they had $100. So that's what we did. Or I'm exaggerating, but maybe by or
not by much.
Yeah, but not by much. So, where was I? And then kind of drilling down. Actually, I'll go back up one more. So theoretically, 5 levels of hierarchy should be enough. You never know. One other key thing is that I think it's on this level somewhere, you can also group these as a grouping function. So you can create a group. Here. All right, so probably it's one of the managed lists is to create a group, or we need to add a new group, and then you can kind of group these together, and it kind of creates another organizational framework for this level. And this is the final level. This is the level 4. Deliverables for all the other ones, benchmark here in Zambia, and here's where the key fluid survey piece is going to come in. All right. So so I'm going to focus on that in the last 10 minutes, and we might have to have another session on the remaining pieces, most in particular the indicators. But just a quick, and maybe even on this, but just as a quick run through, the basic process for this level 4. Where was it? Focus on level 4 was somewhere. Is the people have to, the project people have to think through what data do they want to collect, right? And the idea with having particular types, called level 4 types, is that across your whole work plan, you might be doing the types of things that you're doing might be the same. So even though maybe you're in 7 different countries, talking about all sorts of different things, but they're different. You might be writing a report, you might be creating a tool, you might be doing the training, you might be distributing grain, you might be distributing micronutrient, giving out micronutrients, you might be checking people for measles, but whatever that type of thing, you're always collecting the same type of data in order to get kind of apples to apples data collection. So again, just to use training, every time you do the training, no matter what the training is, or what it's about, or to whom, you want to collect who is the trainer, how many people attended, who attended, what was, you want to upload the registry, upload the event. So the idea is to have this kind of type of data collection that, based on what it is that you're doing, that cross-cuts all those different parts of the work plan. So what you think about, every time I do a training, this is the data I want to collect, and then you create fluid surveys for them. For the most part, you can create, multiple surveys, so, and that creates different tabs here in here under the benchmark. So if I look at, let me just do the one here as an example. I think that actually works. Deliverable type or benchmark type. Is that here somewhere?
Up to the left.
So overall training improvement, I believe it's one. Not this one. So here's one with the, with a test training. But I can say this particular type of benchmark type here, another one deliverable type, has one fluid survey. These are the only one tab, but I can also create different tabs worth of data, right? And those relate to just different fluid surveys in your fluid survey account for this project. So, and that's set up here. Let me just see if I can find an example that had multiple, well, just imagine that there are multiple tabs, and each one of them equates to a fluid survey. Now, in this case, each benchmark that we've set up really accounts for only one response to that survey, right? So this is one response to a fluid survey that has these three questions associated with this deliverable. There's also a way to set up multiple responses, but it's in a very kind of unique, there's a very small way of doing that we can say, kind of create a list. So for example, a register of people attending the trainings. And I think I have that type here also, which is why I wanted to go back. Meeting with register. Let's try that one. So here's the overview. So here's two tabs, right? The same, and this is one survey, and this is another survey. And this survey actually has a register associated with it. Doesn't look great because of my screen, but for each, the way it's supposed to look is kind of a table of first name, last name. But because of my screen on my computer, because
you can hit Control minus to scroll out, to zoom out.
Control minus. Where's minus?
And later you can hit Control 0 to set it back to 100%.
Let me do it here. How about that? Oh, see?
Good job.
Yeah, I didn't use Control, but scrolling was a good idea.
No Control key?
I don't know. Just don't worry about it. I couldn't think that fast. So you see here, you can have a register. So these are multiple responses here, and this is just one response. So, and you can use the surveys in you can use the same survey in different types. You can use, and of course, this type can have multiple surveys, so that it creates some flexibility there. So if you look here under fluid surveys, you have a view sync surveys section. And this lists all the different surveys associated with the account. Right now what we're doing is there's a staging and a prod, or a test and a prod, as we called it here, keeping their same surveys in the same fluid. We only have one fluid survey account. Fluid survey accounts are, cost money. So each one, and we're just telling them to name the surveys accordingly if you only want one for test and prod. There's a few setup things that you have to do in the survey that to associate it. So you can't use the same survey in prod and in test, because there's a little piece of JavaScript that says what it relates to. That means that it can only go to one or the other. But what I'm going to try and do, or what we generally do, is say set up template ones, because of this little code that you have to enter and set up some templates let's say these are what you can use for a standard multi-response survey, a standard one for a single response survey and deliverables, and just copy that, and that can be the framework for each new piece. So if you, let me just go to survey. Should be in Tanzania already. No, not, of course. There's Zambia. That was Tanzania. I know, but I'm in Zambia now. That's what I meant. So you see here, these are the same. These are these surveys, right? In the food survey account. Oops. Prod single template, prod multi-template, etc. So these are linked up, and then you can import them, update them. Every time you need, this is a kind of a key for support, every time you make a fluid survey change, you can continue using the same surveys, but you have to sync again in order to start collecting and pulling the new data into MandE and to get things to work. So just to quickly show you, quickly. If I, what is it now? Let me edit it. This is just a quick note. So here, if you go under here, if you go under the survey description, this JavaScript here, and you notice it has the URL here, is needed in order to get it to pull in properly. A few other just little things about these surveys that the team needs to know, that people setting up need to know. Each question has this identifier field is not required in fluid surveys, but it is required in order to sync to MandE, because that's what keeps the relationship stable between the MandE database and the fluid survey database. So we train people, when I train the administrators, I say this is like the one thing I drill into it. The sync is not gonna work if these aren't here. This way you can change the label, et cetera, without messing up the data. There's one other place where in the Confluence data that we have, in the documentation that we have, it says all this stuff, but there's one other place where you need to add in that JavaScript under pages and messages, here under the thank you page. Also, so that's what. And what this does is, usually a fluid survey standard functionality is like after you complete the survey and submit it, it goes redirects you to a thank you page. But this is saying don't redirect to the thank you page. Just stay where. My understanding is just stay where you are. Make it more like a data system. Similarly, we have to kind of turn on and off features that allow you to not to have the same person be able to enter data on the same survey multiple times and things like that to make it function more like a data system than a survey. Okay, I'm going to leave you. I'm just going to show you one more piece, and then I'm going to let you have lunch, which is, so you sync the surveys. There is some code that if the import doesn't work, it tells you you're missing an identifier here or there.
And what happens if you try to import, like that one that says prod?
You can import it.
Will it mess up prod though?
It won't mess up what? It won't mess up anything. But then I'd rather just, it's probably better to, and when we pull in the data, it's really going to only pull in prod data associated with deliverables on prod. But it still seems like a bad idea to be collecting survey data, associating staging data with prod data. So that's why.
They're just curious if somebody hit it.
Yeah, it'll work, but probably better not to. Yeah. And it's probably not the most ideal. It's better to have two different accounts, but it's just money. Yeah. So just, I guess the thing I want to show you before we leave is this is the place where we link, where the link comes together, where we create. So I think the one I was showing you was meeting with register. Here, so here's where you create the name meeting. This is the benchmark type, the tab name, meeting overview, and there's various other names associated with it. So like if you want to count the number of meetings, when it comes up as an indicator, it says meetings instead of, and this is where it's supposed to, this is what it says on the actual tab. And here's where you're picking which fluid survey of all the ones that are synced we want to show on the first tab, and here's where you want to show it on the second tab. So the second tab has the register, so we pick that test register. Here's as I mentioned before, you can also say, in order to make data collection show it's complete, remember I showed the green and the red before, you can also require certain files. So along with the training, well, the data collection, you also have to update the registration form and the agenda. Along with this, you have to upload, you're entering the data, but also upload the daily attendance list, for example. And then it'll only show up as green. It's supposed to only show up as green if you've done both your file uploads and your data entry. And then it's like you're good with that particular data entry. When setting this up, the ones that require multiple responses, you check off allow multiple responses. If it's the kind of thing where you want it to allow it to show on calendar, you can click on that, and that'll relate to the calendar feature. And that's it. And so this is what's controlling the fact that when I went back wherever that was, that those are the tabs that appeared. Right. So this, meaning overview and register, appeared because I picked the test overview with register, and I configured it so that the test overview with register pulls in one of these, and pulls in this survey and this survey. One little thing to note is that just last notes on fluid surveys. Not every fluid survey's question is supported by MandE because you have to sort of code each type of question the way it comes into the database. So there's only a few certain kind of key questions in the documentation we have here of what's actually supported, because it needs to be coded each time you want to have a particular type of question in order to get it to be used in the indicators. And for the multi-response, there's only one really way of doing it, which is a survey with a single question, which is a 3D matrix that you set up, and you just create one row with multiple columns with one row, and it has your questions in it. And that's how we set up the multiple response, rather than multiple. And then one other thing here is that when you set it up, there's another little piece of thing that you have to do here to you have to add this extra class multi-response table, and that's work. And again, that's why we're just setting it up as a template and allowing people to use it, so we don't have to tell our project team, you have to use a JavaScript class or I don't know what kind of class it is. But all right, it is now 12:35. I didn't leave any time at all for questions or discussion because I'm not Gene. But I'm here, and maybe we should set up a separate session for the whole indicator piece, and the reports. But if anyone has any questions now, other people who want to go to lunch, just feel free to do that.
Thank you, Brian.
Questions? You're welcome. Was it useful? Was it too fast,
Yes.
too slow?
It's a little fast, but it's good.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's hard to go into different. I think it's good to have a good overview, and then we have the documents.
Right.
Explore more of it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I was assuming that our team can go a little faster. So, all right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your day. Happy FY17.
Yeah,
This is for number.
I think it's service catalog.
Service catalog. Yeah, but so I'll buy in.
It's a CCC code.
CCC admin or
20557 3010. Gina, are you still on? No?
I am.
Do I have to do anything besides hit stop recording?